Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to Agatha Christie, the ABC Murders. More than likely, we'll finish the game in this recording. The only thing I can imagine that would draw this out is if there was some kind of chapter select New Game Plus to try and get all the achievements. I pretty much determined, or have decided that it is actually Thor Gray, who is the mastermind, who has been framing ABC Cust as the killer. I don't really know her for a plan, though, as to why she would have needed to specifically kill the first and second victim, or even really kill the third victim, who was her employer, other than to maybe cover up a crime. And we have no evidence as to why the fourth victim would have been picked specifically. And then there is also, I think, a thought that occurred to me that maybe it isn't Thor Gray as much as it's Franklin, the brother, who set up the murders and masterminded everything. That might be the case. If that was the case, then I don't know why Franklin would specifically have gone for the first or second victim or the fourth victim, but killing his own brother to get him out of the way so he might be able to date the secretary seems weird. Maybe that's not the reasoning. Maybe it's he's killing his brother to hide a theft himself. But instead of speculating, let's just play the game and find out. We have told Hastings, we should be at the point where we tell Hastings he needs to have a gun on him, which means we probably have a couple of opportunities here to observe things again.
Hastings
maybe get some ego points.
He's very proud of his bag.
I still don't know why his photo album would be at Poirot's office. It would have to be this is Poirot's office / house, or this is Poirot's office and Hastings is using a spare room to stay there.
Churston, Devon, population 500 inhabitants.
And see, this stop on the seas.
London, Churston. Trains of evening. London, 6:45 p.m. Newton about 11 a.m. Churston, 11:45 a.m.
This game
London,
definitely
11:45 p.m.
needed to explain what an ABC guide
6
is
or 8 a.m.
at the beginning, because
Churston,
we are at the end of the
7:15
game, and only now am I really realizing that it is just the arrival and departure times of the trains. That is insane that you would have been able to go the full run of the game and not pull that off.
What about telling me what you have in mind?
Surtout pas. You wouldn't be able to play your role. Wait one moment, I will bring you my weapon.
And that's just the same dialogue. Then we have the weird camera angles again.
Daily Flicker, September the 11th, 1935. ABC affair, Terminus Doncaster. Japp and Poirot arrest the killer. A.B. Cust is the name of the alphabet murderer. The police have arrested him in a hotel in Doncaster. Was preparing to kill his fourth victim, Mr. Dick Dudley Dunbar,
And I don't know
the
if
establishment manager.
Dunbar
Mr.
was
Dunbar owes his
really
life to
a
the
target
miraculous
ever or
intervention
not.
of Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard.
It'd be
and
interesting
Detective
if
Hercule
Dunbar
Poirot.
showed up in this final meeting. We get yet another achievement.
The Lancet, September 11th,
It'd be interesting if it turned out that this was just an
General Medical
incredibly
Journal. The
complicated
alphabet murderer is not psychotic, according to
insurance
Professor Thompson.
scheme
In an early
to
issue,
have
we
somebody
claimed that the alphabet murderer was
kill
not psychotic.
themselves. If,
Our
say,
assertion
Dunbar
has
wanted
just
to
been
die
confirmed by Professor Thompson,
and wanted
a
to leave
Scotland
the
Yard
insurance
expert,
to his
who has
family
spoken to the
with
prisoner
his
at
weak
great
heart.
length. Not all obsessional killers are psychotic, he explained. It is true that Cust has a disturbed personality and memory disorders. But his amnesia, whether real or pretended, does not alter the fact that he was perfectly
It's funny
lucid
they're
at the
using the
time of his
word
acts.
amnesia instead of
Therefore, he
absences,
will
which
not
they were
escape
using
punishment.
before. It's very weird to have articles about psychology and psychology just in this story at all. I think it's a weird idea to suggest that books should be remastered, but honestly, I wouldn't be upset if a writer decided to tell a very similar story like this, set in a similar time frame, but it was a more modern writer than Agatha Christie, and thus he could fix the psychology so that it's not time appropriate, but it's more realistic. Because honestly, I hear a lot of these psychological discussions, and it just is like setting off red flags in my mind of this is just garbage. Don't listen to any of this. Their understanding as far as psychology is practically non-existent and completely wrong. We're getting achievements here, but I feel like the only way we're really going to get all of the achievements, unless we get really, really lucky, is through a second playthrough in which I can get the donkey responses. But even then, that feels like that would be a second playthrough throughout the entire game getting the wrong responses. I'd still need an achievement guide. And so we've taken every attempt to sit on that we could to sit on that chair, I think. So there aren't achievements from the looks of it for doing the same thing multiple times every time you have an opportunity.
The white ammunition are blank cartridges. The others are real bullets.
Interesting. What's funny is he just said the white ammunition. Like, I can pretty well tell these are blanks because you can see there's a darker cap here, but this is clearly green, this box, and silver, copper on the shells of both of them.
The revolver is loaded with blanks. I still have time to choose real bullets.
Interesting. And then I didn't click on the revolver at all.
My revolver is loaded. I now have to give it to Hastings.
I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Like, having not read the book, I don't know if Poirot would give blanks or real bullets.
The white ammunition are
Hastings.
blank cartridges. The others are real
It
bullets.
does say white.
The revolver is loaded with real bullets. I still have time to choose blanks.
Apparently I don't. Well, I think Hastings would appreciate not
The
shooting
white
somebody.
ammunition are blank cartridges.
And I think Poirot does have such an ego that blanks
The
would
revolver is loaded with
make
blanks.
more
I
sense.
still have time to choose real bullets.
And certainly in this time frame, somebody seeing a gun would just assume it is loaded and loaded with real bullets. But yeah, I have no idea if in the actual story of the ABC murders he didn't hand a loaded revolver to Hastings and Hastings didn't end up shooting somebody.
Voila, I entrust you with my weapon. It has hardly been used. It is almost new.
course, Hastings should be smart enough to immediately check the bullets and check that it's loaded as an avid hunter. So it's a little lacking in... it shows Hastings overly trusts Poirot, and I'm not sure why you would overly trust Poirot, since Poirot does seem to do some weird things sometimes.
Chief Inspector, is that you?
Yes. Sorry, but we haven't found anything.
Have you checked the typewriter?
And the packaging, the letter, and the ribbon reel. We've only found prints left by Cust and his landlady.
It would be funny if it was
Well, never mind, I
landlady.
shall make do.
So, are you still going to hold your meeting?
Of course, Chief Inspector. I can hear my guest coming up the stairs.
Pretty much all these suspects should be in this
Why have you
room.
brought us here, Mr. Poirot?
Same
Since Custer's arrest, I
arrangement
thought it was all done and dusted.
and
Miss
same
Grey
colors
identified him,
on
as well as Miss
everybody.
Barnard.
Yes, and the stockings he saw are of the same brand as the ones found at my aunt's.
This is all true. However, a case is not closed if some questions remain open. And one question is, why did the murderer send me his letters? Why did he challenge me, Hercule Poirot?
Who would have even
Perhaps he
heard of
wanted
him?
to play with you, to taunt you.
She does have a different
Xenophobia?
brooch now.
Maybe he didn't like you because you're foreign.
I may be wrong, but maybe by provoking you, he was looking for glory?
It's funny to ask the
All these
suspects to make
theories should be
theories.
studied. Let us now try and get our brain cells to work.
Interesting. So it's just gonna pause this whole interview to have us. Why was the murder? Why did the murderer make a mistake in the address? Piece of envelope with the wrong address. The late arrival time saved the murderer. Poirot's address is not very well known. The body was still warm. The mistake. Yeah, we don't know. The letters' late arrival saved the murderer. Okay. The mistake was intentional. So somebody had to intercept the letter, or well, no, somebody had to delay the letter arriving the one time that there was a mistake, because the murderer would have been caught otherwise. And why? Which means when that mistake was made, which that was the third victim, it was still important for the murderer to not be caught, for Cuss not to be caught. So obviously the first and second victims weren't as important as the third victim, which points back to Thor Grey or the brother. Why did the killer send the letters to it? Because the murderer challenged Poirot because of his inferiority complex, for glory, out of xenophobia. Well, interesting. This was declared by Captain Hastings, and yet the picture here is not Captain Hastings. I think it's glory, but I guess I'm wrong. It's not xenophobia. It's not inferiority complex either. Interesting. He wrote to Poirot because his address is not very well known.
Is everything clear now?
You might like to explain your reasoning again.
Of course. First of all, remember that the murderer made it a rule to always post his letter before the murder. He never digressed from that rule.
So,
However, in Churton, he encountered a
Poirot
problem.
was picked specifically
The
because
village has
the
only
mailman
500 inhabitants. With advance
wouldn't
warning,
immediately
it would be
fix
easy
the
to arrest him.
mistake.
Therefore, the murderer delayed his letters deliberately with the wrong address. The plan wouldn't have worked if he'd sent it to Scotland Yard or the papers because everybody knows their addresses. The mistake would have been corrected and the letter would have been on time. That is why the murderer chose me as the recipient.
Because for
Interesting.
his plan to succeed, it was necessary for at least one of the letters to have a wrong address and get lost. It was very cunning.
Absolument.
And since I
It is a
suspect
very
she's
subtle
the
plan. It matches
mastermind,
the profile we have drawn up of him perfectly. That of an intelligent, daring and calculating murderer.
But that's not how you describe Cust.
You are quite right, mademoiselle. Like you, I find it hard to believe that this dull character is the clever murderer we are looking for.
Do madmen... I mean, if he's mad, he might have two very different sides.
No doubt. But the murderer is not mad. All the specialists agree that he does not have the profile of the psychopath.
But if Cust is not guilty, how do you explain his presence at the scene of the crimes?
Mr. Clark, the answer to your question is in the medical records of your brother's patients. Documents which Cust most certainly did not have access to. Let us now try and get our brain cells to
so
work.
it probably would have been better, frankly, just to let this monologue, or let us ask us all these questions first before the people arrived, and then have Poirot monologue based on our decision. What do we know about Cust? Cust is easily influenced. Let's see. And he follows his obligations to a T. Let's see. Cust was wounded during the war. Cust is mentally fragile and easily manipulated. How do we explain Cust's presence at the scene? Let's see. Cust was a door-to-door salesman. It was a coincidence that his victims were in town. It's never been quite the same in the head. Not those two. Is it that one? Tries to overcome his travel sickness by traveling often by train. Wasn't he wanted to swim either. His presence at the crime scenes is because the murderer, the real murderer, sent him that way. He didn't go to Bexhill because he wanted to swim. Those two. Cust was manipulated. The killer made him go to the towns so as to hide his tracks.
Dr. Clark's patients' records provided a very useful list of potential victims, sorted by alphabetical order. The killer definitely used it, explaining the fact that all the victims were former patients of the doctor.
Why go alphabetical?
It is this fact that
in
clears
this
Cust once and for all, because he never
Why not
had
go in
access to these
random?
records. So how did he happen to be at the scene of the crimes? Either the murderer sent him there, or Cust was following him closely. Cust's highly suggestible nature leads us to the second hypothesis. The
Really?
murderer was manipulating him. He systematically sent Cust to the towns where he was going to strike,
That wasn't the second
so that the
hypothesis.
suspicion
That was
would
the
land on
first
the poor
one.
man's shoulder.
That's evil. What sort of killer could have such a plan? And what would he gain from three completely different murders?
Indeed, it seems unlikely that the same murderer committed all the crimes. What should we take from that?
Did they all kill somebody? This is the first time we've had 4 options. There are 3 murderers. just one murder of interest to the killer, so the murderer kills for pleasure, so that there are 3 murderers. Yeah, and this story could go either way. It could be that there are 3 murderers, or there was one murderer of interest to the killer. I think it's this one.
Just one murder was of benefit to the murderer. The others were just diversions. On reflection, there is only one conclusion. The murderer killed once out of interest and twice to divert our attention. This reasoning points at 2 potential culprits.
Franklin Clark.
Donald Fraser?
Yes, mademoiselle. That's good thinking. Mr. Fraser may have killed Betty out of jealousy. Mr. Clark may have killed his brother in order to inherit his large fortune. Both have a motive.
But Donald did not have access to Dr. Clark's records.
Please allow me to disagree with you, mademoiselle.
Donald was treated by Dr. Clark. Donald was resting at Charleston. Donald's firm worked for Clark.
He works for Court and Brunskill, one of whose clients was Sir Carmichael.
It doesn't prove that I went to Comeside.
You could have done it, and you may have used the opportunity to take a look at Sir Carmichael's
It'd be really
record.
funny if it was Donald.
You think I'm guilty?
You or Mr. Franklin Clark?
That's ridiculous.
Both of you have a motive. The question is, which of you has the profile that most resembles the murderer?
I think you're still
Let us
missing
now
out on
try
Thor
and
Gray.
get our brain cells to work.
See, this is insulting on the other side of the fence, as it were, because the fact that they're not considering Thor Gray after all the women have just been slightly more depicted as non-characters, weak characters, often victims of murder. It's now once again under-characterizing Thor Gray in the mind of Poirot, at least. And maybe this is intentional by Agatha Christie. Maybe she writes Poirot as just an ignorant to the possibility and the capability of the female sex as far as being murderers type character. Let's see. Is Donald clever? Since we know that the murderer is clever. He would have made Betty a good husband. He was always attentive and generous. True gentleman. The dream part. Would that show that he's clever? Let's see. He's a bright man with promising career. One day. I wonder if this proves he's not clever, or maybe we're trying to prove he is clever. I guess that's the option. I kind of wonder if you could have done different options. Is Donald sure of himself? Let's see. He's easy to influence by the sister. Is Donald a seducer? That's not the answer. That's not the answer. That's not the answer. Does Donald like trains? Yes. Interesting. Seems like we're going to accuse Donald. I feel like at this point we're going to just accuse everybody. Is Donald impulsive? He's quick-tempered, which is not cold. Is Donald generous? Yes. So does everything have to match in Poirot's mind for you to make an accusation?
Ladies and gentlemen, Donald may share many character traits with the murderer, but he does not have his cold indifference. He has a temper. It is hard to imagine him planning anything. Also, jealousy is his motive, and crimes of passion are rarely planned.
Right, I suppose it's my turn to be subjected to the same scrutiny.
Absolument, Mr. Clark.
They probably
now
should
try and get
translate
how
when
brain
he
cells
writes,
to work.
says something in French to English, just in case somebody doesn't understand what he means. He doesn't speak in French that often. Is he clever? Let's see. He did have this book. I wonder if that means he's not clever because he's reading a kid's book. I think The Railway Children is a kid's book, although that would be odd evidence. So, no, that's not it. That's not it. Let's just go through them all. School report says he is clever. Interesting. Is he sure of himself? Naive when it comes to women. That's never going to be the right answer. Interesting. Is he a seducer? Apparently so. Does he like trains? I guess The Railway Children is that he likes trains. That's very flaky evidence. I mean, you could like the book or just have a book and not like it. Is he cold? I think the answer is probably no. But apparently it's yes. Is he generous? Well, yeah, he did pay for the train tickets too. Like every little sentence, every little action apparently is coming back for the video game aspects.
As you have all
And I
seen,
assume these are...
there is a disturbing similarity between Mr. Clark's profile and that of the killer.
I suppose
In
all of
actual
this
fact,
happened
it is
in the
exactly
story.
the same.
Mr. Poirot, your psychological studies are interesting, but your conclusions do not add up. Why would I have wished my brother's death? The inheritance is lawfully mine. I just have to wait.
No, you had to act quickly.
Say that Thor Grey bothered him. Say that Franklin was impatient. Well, the murderer's profile says he's not impatient. Is it the case that Thor Grey was possibly planning on robbing him and Franklin knew that?
Because of Miss Grey. Mademoiselle, although you haven't been telling the truth, there is no doubt in my mind that you would have found a way to marry Sir Carmichael after Lady Clark's death. For you, Mr. Clark, it was a disaster. If Miss Grey had children by your brother, you would not have inherited a thing.
Oh.
You realized the danger after reading several letters from Comside, especially one in which your brother opened his heart to you. So you hurried home from China, and you took action.
Well, it seems like I've been totally
Kirst was no more
wrong.
than a puppet manipulated by the real culprit. You, Mr. Clark.
Such an imagination, Mr. Poirot.
He's
In
such
fact,
a
nobody
small
manipulated
character.
Cust. The famous instructions he received by post. He wrote them on the typewriter. We know that for sure.
Oh no, you know perfectly well that is not true. Eh bien voilà, Light has now been shed on the ABC murders.
That was an odd cut.
Your theories are ingenious, but you haven't any proof.
One point to him. For the moment, I have no material proof. Either I admit to it, or I bluff.
Well, obviously he's going to bluff at this point. Invented item of plump proof found at Alice Asher's tobacco shop. Lie about the fingerprints found on Cust's typewriter. Say the proof is going to be easy to find. He would have been at the shop, so probably wouldn't know about any piece of evidence. Like, any of these seem like they could be the right answer. Let's see. I think it would probably be more of a case of the typewriter.
One thing proves it. The prints you left on Cust's typewriter.
Enough.
Oh, of course you wiped the typewriter before sending it. But not carefully enough. Scotland Yard has found your print along with those of Cust.
I understand why you never wanted to lend me your new typewriter, and why you were searching through your brother's things. And the hole you dug on the moors. What did you hide there? The knife you used to kill your brother?
Geez, that's a lot of
Game,
evidence.
set, match. You win, Mr. Poirot. But it was worth trying.
This is awful, really. Kind of a terrible way to end this murder mystery. To have a character...
Don't come near me! I'll never let you take me, Mr. Poirot.
Well, that's gonna hurt, even if it was blanks. So it seems like you can get a very different ending.
For you. I expected your reaction, so I used blanks. I'm sorry, mademoiselle, but your second chance has been lost. Franklin Clark will never inherit his brother's fortune.
Wow. Have you seen the 50 turns? Trophies unlocked during the bonuses. See, this feels very rough. They're just kind of rushing towards the end. Load screen after load screen, cutscene and animation.
Disappointed at having missed the chance to become Lady Clark, Thora Grey left England. Donald Fraser and Megan Barnard married.
And see, this feels like this could have been a very different ending.
On Poirot's recommendation,
there might be a
Mary Drower
path.
started to work for Lady Clark. The elderly lady's condition suddenly took a turn for the better. And a few months later, to Dr. Logan's great surprise, she was back on her feet again. According to this eminent physician, it appears to be an extremely rare case of spontaneous remission.
So it
Lady
seems
Clark
like
has enjoyed
Thora
very
Grey
good
was
health ever
poisoning
since.
her.
Journal of an Innocent. The incredible story of ABC. As for A.B. Cust, after being advised by Poirot, he made a great deal of money by selling his story to the press. And as for me, and with business booming, the Black Swan has become the #1 tourist attraction
Interesting.
in the whole of
Dick
Yorkshire,
Dunbar
even more
is
popular than
doing
York
the voice
Minster.
acting. Or that sounds like that's actually Donald doing the voice acting. Same voice actor. So that was based on the novel of the ABC Murders. And so what I should do while we look at the credits is we should keep an eye on how many people worked on this game, because it probably was enough, and that they just probably shouldn't have tried to use such a custom engine and made some decisions here and there in the wrong places as far as what to focus on as far as animations. I suspect we may find out that there is differences in this game versus the book. We can definitely see here that there is very few programmers being mentioned. One art director, one production director, one technical art director. Let's see. According to Wikipedia, the game retains the main plot of the novel and also the murderer's identity. However, there are some changes, like the number of victims, which is now under 3. As the 4th planned victim here, a man named Dick Dunbar, owner of the Black Swan Hotel, is saved. In the game, all victims are related. Alice Archer, Betty Bernard, together with Donald Cust and Dunbar, are former patients of Sir Carmichael Clark. The finding of the burnt patient files by Poirot at Combside and the recovery of the files allows Poirot to discover the next victim's identity and prevent the murder. This clue also gives players a strong hint that the real murderer is, even though it's not necessary to know it to finish the game. There are 2 endings in the games depending on whether Poirot loads his gun with real bullets or blanks before handing it to Hastings just prior to the final meeting. And that definitely comes off as a gameplay conceit where they just felt like they needed to have multiple endings, whereas really there shouldn't have been multiple endings. This game is available on Android and Switch and Linux and basically every platform, so yeah, most recently it came out on the Nintendo Switch on October 6th of 2020. So their engine is somewhat succeeding in being ported, but would be better if they had... Well, it is actually the Unity engine. They just didn't use it well or implement it well. I wouldn't argue that this game needed to be in the Unreal Engine, because that's more for first-person shooters. So we kind of know that there's some polish that could have been put on this game and some different focus to put a better experience near the end where it needs to really happen in a murder mystery versus the better experience being at the beginning. Remember that at the beginning of this game, they basically lied and made this game feel like it was going to be a fairly open world point and click adventure. And by the time you're halfway through the game, they've pretty much completely abandoned the idea of walking from one place to another place at your own free choice, and it became a direct linear experience, much closer to something like a Telltale game, this would have worked a lot better if this was much closer to a Telltale game where it was a linear experience. So yeah, I'm not particularly happy with the way this game was designed. The story itself is based on the book for the most part. I can't really say that I'm upset that I didn't guess who it was and thought it was Thor Grey this whole time. I, up until I just checked now, would have still assumed that there would have been a chance to point it towards Thor Grey and have it ending where she was the killer, or point it to even Donald and point to him being the killer. Let's see. I suppose we have the full reconstruction now. Nothing is missing. So we should just hit this. And see, these flat images could have been used as cutscenes and almost certainly at some point they were going to be cutscenes instead of using the 3D models. And you can see how this art is also very flat, very, very flat 2D hand-drawn animation instead of the 3D models with that style. Still feels like there should have been a 4th reconstruction, even if it was a bonus to like show how the murder for the 4th victim would have happened. And then let's see. So we missed an observation, at least one. We missed all the donkey mistakes. And I think we pretty much have to do that. So, Sheriff, mustache, Dolly, mustache, Black Swan, mustache, or just Black Swan is missing. Black Dragon, Dragon Smoke is missing. So there's 8 achievements that are missing in total, I can say. And I couldn't imagine really wanting to go back and get these unless you can jump to the levels. Let's watch the reconstruction.
When Franklin understands that his brother's inheritance is...
Actually, let's come over here and do this first. So we can actually hear this. People.
When Franklin understands that his brother's inheritance is going to be stolen from under his nose, he decides to get rid of him. In order not to be considered as a suspect, he has the idea of including the murder as part of a series that the police will put down to a madman. Franklin uses Sir Carmichael's medical records to choose his victims as well as the ideal suspect, Alexander Bonaparte Cust, who was seriously wounded in the war and suffers from bouts of amnesia. Franklin writes the letters he will send me before each murder
You'd
on his own
almost
typewriter
assume that
in advance.
he found Cust first
by
and then
letter
thought
and
about
offers
the
him a job.
ABC
Cust is convinced that he is working for a hosiery company. In reality, it is Franklin that sends him his instructions, his goods, and even his typewriter. When we receive the first letter, Hastings thinks that it is a joke. As for me, filled with foreboding, I prefer to inform Chief Inspector Japp. Following his written instructions, Cust goes to Andover. He visits Mrs. Asher's tobacco shop and sells her a pair of stockings. After Cust's visit, Franklin, in turn, enters the tobacco shop. Mrs. Asher is not suspicious of the murderer, whom she takes to be an ordinary customer. The old lady turns around to take a packet of cigarettes. She is beaten to death. We investigate the first murder with Hastings. No suspect has a motive. A few weeks later, we receive a second letter signed ABC. Chief Inspector Japp is informed. The victim's name should start with the letter B. Alexander Bonaparte Cust goes to Bexhill. He sells Mrs. Barnard a pair of stockings. Betty Barnard leaves her work. She's dressed to go out. The young woman is strangled on the beach.
How he got away with all
Betty
of that,
was
I
killed
don't
by
know.
the man who had arranged to meet her that evening, the seducer Franklin Clark. In Bexhill, Donald Fraser appears to be the perfect suspect for Betty's murder, but he has no connection with Mrs. Asher. 5 days after the Bexhill murder, Cust goes to Churston for his work. In the afternoon, Soagret turns away a stocking seller. After dinner, Sir Carmichael Clark takes his usual walk. His brother waits for him, hidden behind a bush. The murderer leaps out from his hiding place and cuts Sir Clark's throat. The third letter arrived late. Franklin deliberately wrote a wrong address. In Churston, Thorogray and Franklin Clark are the main suspects. Back in London,
Why it
Cust
had
is
to be
seized by
late
violent coughing fit and brings
is
up blood.
because
He stains his
he
shirt,
was
which later
slow to murder
frightens
his brother, I
landlady.
guess?
We receive the final letter from ABC. The next murder will be in Doncaster. The second general meeting in London highlights the common point between the victims, stockings, and a throat condition. Custer's landlady telephones Scotland Yard to tell them about her suspicions. Cust is arrested shortly afterwards in Doncaster. Franklin had planned a fourth murder in Doncaster. He abandons the ID after Custer's arrest. Custer confesses to the crimes he did not commit. He's an easy culprit. Too easy. Franklin Clark is unmasked. He is the true culprit and the man who manipulated Custer. And there we have it. Another case solved by Hercule Poirot.
Okay, we watched the whole thing. That didn't give us an achievement or anything. Although I would have been slightly surprised if it had. Just turn that up a little. Yeah, the whole ego points system, I don't know at what point you even needed the ego points. I don't know if they actually tied into any achievement, as it were. It kind of seems like they don't. So they're a pointless gameplay mechanic in what really should have been closer to a Western take on a visual novel, just a kinetic linear visual novel with no branching paths. The being able to use real bullets versus fake bullets is, again, not really necessary. I honestly would have taken out a lot of the choices in the video game elements and just tried to have an interactive visual novel experience for this type of game, because the gameplay elements in this game are just very standard stuff. And it gets thinner and thinner as you get past that first half of the game. Less puzzles, less secret clocks and Victrolas that you have to turn on. All of that was pretty much binned, and it definitely feels like there were two teams that worked on this game, and one team worked on the last half of the game and did a much worse job than the team that worked on the first half. The only thing I could think here is there some possibility where we could start over. Interesting. It does seem like the game just starts
Some post for
completely
you, Poirot.
over.
Mr. Hercule Poirot, you fancy yourself, don't you, at solving mysteries that are too difficult for our poor thick-head British
So
police?
you would just play the game
Let
a
us see,
second
Mr.
time.
Clever Poirot, just how clever you can be. Perhaps you'll find this nut too hard to crack. Look out for Endover on the 21st of the month. Yours extra, A, B, C.
I think it's worth pointing out that also
it's some
because
sort of
of the awkward
Maybe.
layout
But
and
please remind
interface,
me to inform Chief Inspector Japp.
there definitely were 2 or 3 places where I had to use a clue, which may have also lost us some points on the ego points. So what we'll want to see is if this game, if the game resets. Was this scene in the game the first time? Had they been showing us cuts even from like the very beginning of the game, and I just didn't pay any attention to it? I may very well have blinked and missed that, or there may be a slight difference in playing the game a second time. See, this is an odd scene. I don't remember this either. And why was that even there? Like, no line of dialogue was even shown. Like,
It's here, Poirot. The murder took place in this street. Grim place indeed.
Tout à fait, Hastings. The streets of Andover are in a terrible state.
Look, there's Chief Inspector Japp. He's talking with a policeman.
and see, I don't
Let
know
us
if the
try
game
not to
is
get our shoes
perhaps
wet.
skipping over sections in some weird way because it knows I've already done a lot of things. Yeah, this whole scene is just straight up a lie. Like, you do nothing with the butcher shop. You barely talk to the vegetable salesman. You do nothing with this building here. There's no reason for you to have been in this area or been able to walk around this area. I would have been fine if this was a true point-and-click adventure game and there was more things to really do and find. But let's see, we're back to chapter 1. Our notebook is empty. And we are back to the first question. Which to me, that probably means that we would be back to 0% and 0 ego points, or 1% and 0 ego points. And nothing's going to ever take away from, I imagine, these and these and these achievements. So you could play the game a second time, but you're basically, I think, just playing the game a second time. I don't think you're, let's see, profile-wise, this does just say 0%. This isn't 101%. Or, well, it says 1% instead of 101%. So, yeah. Even though I am only 8 achievements shy, I can't imagine wasting the time to go through this story a second time for achievements or ego points or just going through it a second time for fun. Now that I kind of know how the murder mystery goes, I could probably get all the wrong answers and right answers, but I still would have a huge amount of struggle because a lot of the answers had more to do with the fact that you had to know how Hercule Poirot would have said it in the book, which I still don't really know that answer, or how you think Hercule Poirot would act in any situation, which I still don't know that answer. We're not getting that tutorial in the introduction that would have been very helpful at the beginning of this game. Take out that cutscene of them riding on the train and put in a flat scene just showing Poirot and explaining who he is and explaining who Hastings is and explaining how he thinks and acts. That is something that could have been an easy tutorial for all Agatha Christie stories, because I think Poirot is in all the Agatha Christie stories, or at least most of them. So making an introductory section would have been fine. It also would have been a great place to put a tutorial just to make sure players know how to click with the mouse and move left and right and such. Because then that tutorial could be reused in the next Agatha Christie story. I still feel like the ABC Murders is probably not the best story. It's probably one of the most known stories of Agatha Christie's, and that's why they chose it, but it's probably not the best one to be the first one. I imagine if they could manage to make another Agatha Christie story game, they probably would do a lot better. But I don't know if it would really sell any better. Because, yeah, it's still going to be a murder mystery game that at best you make it like a Telltale game with a lot less perceived variety, or you make it a visual novel and just a kinetic visual novel. Yeah, I think visual novel really would be the way to translate a novel. It's in the name, quite literally. You should probably translate a lot of well-known novels. I would be fairly happy to find Sherlock Holmes stories turned into visual novels versus people making hidden object games that feel like they have Sherlock Holmes in them, or people making match 3 low effort arcade games that might feel like they have Sherlock Holmes in it. The closest thing I guess you have is like the Ace Attorney series, as far as a visual novel with interesting characters that are like Sherlock Holmes. I don't hate the art style, but it probably wasn't worth it. I kind of hate the implementation of most of the rest of this game, but it's not terrible. This is totally a game worth playing once, but only once. It is miles better just because the story is better and because there's an actual better effort in presenting entertainment when you do run into a gameplay mechanic. So I would definitely approve of this game way more than playing the Nancy Drew dossier or Resorting to Danger. I don't think the previous Nancy Drew dossier game is that good either. Eventually, I'll get around to playing the original Nancy Drew games that aren't the Nancy Drew dossier games, and we'll see if those are any good. I would also probably appreciate it if I could go back and play the old Agatha Christie games on Steam, but they're not available. I could certainly see a point in the future where they try to make games a lot faster, and we some point saw 5 or 6 Agatha Christie games come out fairly quickly. There are other Sherlock Holmes games too, and inherently the Sherlock Holmes games also run into the same problem, even though I haven't really played any of them, but they run into the same problem even from the onset. You can tell that they are trying very hard to make the game 3D and action focused, when that's really not what Sherlock Holmes was all about. Anyways, that's going to be it for this series. I don't feel need to drone on any further. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos, because that's what YouTube wants, and it helps me with engagement and all of that. If you go to my YouTube channel, there is a playlist tab, and I have a playlist for every game I've ever played, so check out some of those. And if you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites so you can get notifications when I have a new video out, those links are also down below in the description box. And then finally, if you want to support me further, I have a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list, or just gift me a gift card. That would be very much appreciated. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.